People don't often think about their gut as a potential cause of their low testosterone. Everyone knows about diet, exercise, sleep, lowering stress, getting sunlight, probably even some obscure supplements as well. But the gut is actually really important for testosterone. If you've tried everything to increase your testosterone, but you haven't fixed any gut issues that you have, that is something you're missing. So let's talk about exactly how your gut can influence your testosterone. If you've been interested in health for long enough, you probably know by now that you have something called a gut microbiome. This is the billions of microorganisms that live inside your digestive tract, mostly bacteria. Many of the bacteria are good, some of them are bad, some of them will grow kind of excessively and become harmful if they get the opportunity to. It's important that you have a nice balance of good bacteria in your gut. When the harmful microbes, called pathogens, grow too much and start to dominate, then you have a state called gut dysbiosis. It's an imbalanced microbiome and it causes all kinds of problems downstream. The microbes in your gut can influence the HPG axis, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, and this is the system in your body that produces testosterone. The hypothalamus in your brain sends gonadotropin releasing hormone to your pituitary gland in your brain. The pituitary sends luteinizing hormone to your testes, and then your testes produce testosterone. And the gut microbes that I've just described can influence this axis. Good gut bacteria produce metabolites called short-chain fatty acids. These reduce inflammation and they strengthen the intestinal barrier so that stuff doesn't leak out from your gut into your blood. You definitely want a strong gut barrier. These short-chain fatty acids can potentially enhance the amount and activity of IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. I have a whole video on IGF-1. It's very important for growth and height and stuff like that, but in this context, IGF-1 is actually good for testosterone. IGF-1 takes part in mitochondriogenesis in Leydig cells. That means it helps produce new mitochondria in the Leydig cells in your testes. The Leydig cells being the cells that produce testosterone. So more mitochondria means more efficient energy metabolism, which is good all around. IGF-1 can also affect steroid hormone synthesis, including testosterone. And just to drill it in even further, mice that have been genetically engineered to have no insulin receptor and no IGF-1 receptor, they have shrunken testes, their Leydig cells are not developed properly, and they have low testosterone. So that shows us pretty clearly that insulin and IGF-1 are important for testosterone. And the good bacteria in your gut can indirectly increase IGF-1. So that's the first reason that you want your gut microbiome to be in good shape. And now in an unhealthy gut, where there are too many pathogenic, harmful bacteria, or maybe increased permeability of the intestine, which is also known as leaky gut, this can cause hormonal dysregulation. In a dysbiotic gut with too many pathogens, you often get a lot of something called lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin, which is produced from gram-negative bacteria. When I worked in a physiology lab, we would use LPS, endotoxin, to induce inflammation in cell models. So this is not something that you want floating around in your system. When endotoxin gets into your blood circulation through a leaky gut barrier, it disrupts the HPG axis, which we have just talked about. If you have a healthy intestinal barrier, then not much endotoxin gets into your blood. But with an impaired intestinal barrier, like from a high-fat diet or stress, endotoxin can enter the blood. And when this happens, it messes up testosterone production at all levels, from the brain to the testes, largely through causing inflammation. It leads to lower levels of luteinizing hormone in the blood. It damages Leydig cells and impairs Leydig cell function. And higher levels of endotoxin are correlated with lower serum testosterone. And a study found that men with more pathogenic bacteria in their gut producing endotoxin had a lower testosterone. So it's pretty clear that if your gut is messed up and you have lots of endotoxin in your system, your testosterone is probably going to be compromised. A healthy gut can support the HPG axis, and a dysbiotic gut can suppress the axis, mostly through inflammation. And this is a two-way relationship. Low androgen levels can worsen gut health. Androgens help to maintain the intestinal barrier integrity and regulate the immune balance in the gut. So if one or the other is messed up, it can make a kind of negative spiral of worsening gut health and lowering androgen levels, and you need to break this cycle. So that's how the balance of your gut microbiota can influence testosterone and vice versa. And the microbes in the gut themselves can also interact directly with androgens. The microbiome acts as a metabolic organ that can chemically modify hormones, including androgens. Lots of gut bacteria produce enzymes that can degrade steroid hormones. For example, Pseudomonas nitroreducens is a bacteria that can metabolize testosterone. It carries an enzyme called 3-beta-17-beta-HSD that breaks down testosterone into inactive metabolites. And when researchers introduced this bacteria into the gut of mice, their testosterone goes way down. So that shows this bacteria bacteria can lower testosterone levels. This bacteria usually isn't found in humans, but in some cases it is. So it's been found in men with hyperlipidemia, for example, and it seems to cause low testosterone, which then leads to hyperlipidemia by messing up lipid metabolism. Other bacteria can do similar things to testosterone as well. Comomonas testosteroni is a bacteria which was named for its ability to use testosterone as a carbon source, and it can degrade androgens. And some species of Mycobacterium can degrade testosterone using the enzyme 3-beta-HSDH. Basically, specific species of microbes in your gut can influence your testosterone. If you have lots of androgen degrading microbes, that could lower your testosterone. And if you're lacking those androgen degrading microbes, you could have higher testosterone. It's also important to note that mice raised with zero microbiome, like completely sterile, no microbes in their gut at all, these mice have lower testosterone than normal healthy mice with a normal microbiome. So it's not like you just want to get rid of all of the microbes in your gut. You need a microbiome for normal testosterone and normal health. Another very important mechanism by which gut bacteria influence testosterone is enterohepatic recirculation of hormones. Entero meaning intestine and hepatic meaning liver. The liver metabolizes testosterone and its derivatives by conjugating them. For example, by forming testosterone glucuronide. These conjugates are then excreted in bile into the intestines or via the kidneys. In normal conditions, some of these conjugated hormones can be reclaimed rather than excreted, and gut bacteria have a very important role in that. Gut bacteria with beta-glucuronidase enzymes cleave the conjugates, freeing the testosterone or DHT to be reabsorbed back into circulation instead of being excreted out of the body. Clostridial species in the colon are especially important for this deconjugation because they produce beta-glucuronidases that target glucuronide-bound androgens. So gut bacteria can basically help to recycle or reabsorb testosterone that was destined for excretion and salvages some of the testosterone that would otherwise be lost. If your gut microbiome is disrupted somehow by like antibiotics or low microbial diversity, this enterohepatic recycling of testosterone can be messed up, meaning you lose more testosterone through excretion and you have lower circulating testosterone. But a gut microbiome that's healthy with plenty of Clostridia can increase androgen reabsorption. For example, young mice with a normal healthy microbiome have higher intestinal free androgen levels than mice with zero microbiome. So having that healthy microbiome frees up more of the androgens to be used instead of excreted. The takeaway is gut bacteria clearly help to regulate how much of the body's testosterone is retained versus excreted. There are certain microbial patterns that are associated with testosterone status. A diverse gut microbiome is a good thing. It's a marker of health and it's associated with better hormonal profiles. Men with higher testosterone tend to have more gut microbial diversity and higher amounts of beneficial microbes, and some specific types of bacteria seem to be beneficial for testosterone. Ruminococcus is a fiber fermenting bacterium in the Firmicutes phylum. It's significantly more abundant in men with high testosterone, and it might be helping because it produces short-chain fatty acids by digesting dietary fiber. As I mentioned earlier, these short-chain fatty acids are good for the health of the gut barrier, reducing inflammation and increasing IGF-1, and all of this indirectly benefits testosterone. Men with high testosterone also tend to have more Firmicutes like Clostridiales and Thericibacter and fewer pathogens. And there are a bunch of other species that also seem to be associated with testosterone like Acinetobacter, Dorea, and Megamonas. The point is, gut bacteria clearly influence testosterone levels. So based on the mechanisms that I've just told you about, it is clear that an unhealthy gut can drag down your testosterone levels through multiple pathways, like increased endotoxin load, testosterone degrading microbes, lower levels of short-chain fatty acids, increased cortisol and pro-inflammatory cytokines, and even reduced nutrient absorption of things like zinc, selenium, magnesium, and vitamin D, which are all important for testosterone. And these are not all separate mechanisms either. A typical Western diet that's high in ultra-processed food and calories can simultaneously cause dysbiosis, increased gut permeability, and obesity. And together these can significantly lower testosterone. It's kind of a perfect storm for gut problems and low testosterone. And as an example, rodents on a high-fat diet develop obesity, and they also get gut dysbiosis and inflammation, and this lowers their testosterone. But restoring their gut health through probiotic supplementation can mitigate the drop in testosterone. So there is hope that your gut is not irreversibly damaged. So now let's talk about what you can do to improve this situation. I suppose the obvious first one is your diet, what you're putting into your body. The main principles for this are pretty straightforward. You should eat a mostly whole foods diet with plenty of fiber and minimize processed inflammatory foods. I'll start with fiber. A diet with plenty of fiber from things like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, and nuts feeds the beneficial gut bacteria. The fiber is fermented by microbes like Ruminococcus and Bifidobacterium to produce short-chain fatty acids, which strengthen the intestinal barrier and reduce inflammation. Higher fiber intake is linked with higher microbial diversity in the gut and lower levels of endotoxin in the blood, which is good. Low fiber diets starve these helpful microbes, potentially leading to dysbiosis. As I've described earlier, having enough short-chain fatty acids and keeping inflammation low will support your testosterone production. The next thing you can do is eating fermented foods and probiotics. So these are foods that naturally contain live microbes, and when you eat them, you introduce these beneficial microbes into your gut. So things like yogurt, kefir, fermented cheeses, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. These contain bacteria like lactobacilli or bifidobacteria and others. Men with the highest intake of dietary live microbes have a significantly lower risk of testosterone deficiency than those with low intake. So seemingly, more probiotics and more fermented food in your diet means higher testosterone. And these foods probably work by improving the overall microbiome balance and reducing inflammation, so no surprises there. And writing this section has made me realize I need to get more fermented foods in my diet. Yogurt, sauerkraut, and kefir are the main ones I usually go for. I also like kimchi as well. Not a big fan of kombucha though. Most people should try to get some fermented food or drink in their diet every day. Next, you should avoid added sugars and ultra-processed foods. Refined sugars and ultra-processed foods promote an inflammatory microbiome, and they can impair the function of the gut barrier. And both of these things are, of course, bad for testosterone. And if you end up with insulin resistance from extremely high sugar intake, that can potentially make your testosterone situation worse as well. And then some additives in ultra-processed foods can negatively impact gut health, altering the composition of the microbiome, damaging the intestinal lining. I personally find that most ultra-processed food makes my gut feel pretty rough. And when I eat whole foods, my gut is just better. It does have to be the right whole foods though. There are plenty of people who still have food sensitivities even to whole foods. Common culprits are things like gluten, dairy, nightshades, and foods that are high in FODMAPs like onions, garlic, cruciferous vegetables, and some fruits. So pay attention to how your gut is responding to specific foods, and don't aggravate it by eating loads of foods that you know mess up your gut. That will lead to more inflammation, a leakier gut, and that is not going to be good for your testosterone. You also need to moderate your alcohol consumption. Excessive alcohol is a toxin to the gut lining and the gut microbiota. Chronic alcohol use increases your intestinal permeability, also known as leaky gut, and it increases endotoxin levels. And as we discussed earlier, you do not want endotoxin in your system. Heavy drinkers often have lower testosterone levels, so if you're going to drink, do it in moderation, like a glass of wine with a meal, and do not binge drink. So I mentioned probiotics and fermented food earlier, but let's go into a bit more detail. Probiotics are live bacteria, and the goal of taking them is to positively influence your gut microbiome. There are some types of probiotics that seem to be beneficial for testosterone, but to be honest, I'm not hugely convinced that taking these are going to save you. One that you may have heard of is Lactobacillus reuteri. In mice, L. reuteri increases testicular weight, it gives them more Leydig cells, and it gives them higher circulating testosterone levels. And it also counteracts age-associated testicular atrophy. And it's thought that all of this stuff is happening thanks to the anti-inflammatory effects of L. reuteri. But there have been some trials in humans, and they haven't been so promising. A 12-week trial in older men supplementing this same probiotic found no increase in testosterone compared to placebo, but it did improve triglyceride levels. So L. reuteri alone is probably not enough to overcome other factors suppressing testosterone. Another probiotic is Lactobacillus rhamnosus. In obese mice, this probiotic reduced the obesity-related drop in testosterone, so it has some protective effect there. Another one, Lactobacillus paracasei, combined with some other nutrients, increased testosterone and LH in humans, as well as improving their semen parameters. And lastly, Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus amyloliquefaciens C1 supplementation in cows increases bacteria in the gut that produce short chain fatty acids, and IGF-1. And as I mentioned earlier several times, these are useful for testosterone. And these probiotics also reduce the numbers of pathogens in the cow's guts. So the direct evidence for probiotics influencing testosterone in humans isn't very strong, in my opinion, and I'm not going to claim that these will save your testosterone. But there are some very smart people who are quite convinced by the power of probiotics in this context. And I think they could be a useful supplement if you have gut issues that are causing low testosterone. Prebiotics are indigestible fibers that selectively feed beneficial gut microbes. Increasing your intake of prebiotics can shift the microbiome towards a healthier composition and increase the production of short-chain fatty acids, which strengthen the gut barrier and reduce inflammation, as I've already said about 10 times, and that is good for testosterone. But again, I'll be honest, there's very little research directly linking prebiotic intake to improve testosterone levels. So like with probiotics, I'm not convinced that this is going to make a huge difference for testosterone, but it is pretty important for general gut health, so still something you need to pay attention to. There are some specific prebiotics that could be kind of promising. Resistant starch is a type of starch that escapes digestion and ferments in the colon, and it increases short-chain fatty acid production significantly. Resistant starch also increases some of the bacteria that are known to be positively associated with testosterone, like Ruminococcus. Another prebiotic is psyllium husk. This one is quite popular with health influencers online. It's a soluble fiber that has prebiotic effects. It gels in the gut and improves blood sugar and cholesterol. And for our purposes, it improves gut microbiota. It decreases gut inflammation. So both of those could be good for testosterone, of course, but I am extrapolating here. I don't believe there are any direct studies linking psyllium husk and testosterone. I have some friends who have used psyllium husk and they say their gut and their bowel movements are much better. So it seems to be a pretty good supplement, especially if you don't normally get much fiber. And lastly, polyphenols. These are not fibers, but they function like prebiotics by being metabolized in the gut by the microbes into beneficial compounds. For example, green tea polyphenols reduce gut inflammation, they reduce gut permeability, and they reduce circulating endotoxins. So that is all good for testosterone. So foods with polyphenols like berries, dark chocolate, green tea, turmeric, these are probably good for gut and hormonal health. If you're going to introduce prebiotics into your diet, do it slowly. Don't nuke your system with a bunch of them immediately because that could cause some problems like bloating. Moving on from the diet stuff, your lifestyle choices will influence your gut health and your testosterone. Sleep is an obvious one. Most testosterone release occurs during sleep, and it's pretty well known that poor sleep can reduce your testosterone. Poor sleep also causes gut dysbiosis, decreasing the beneficial species of bacteria and increasing harmful inflammatory species. And sleep disturbances also lead to higher gut permeability, leaky gut. And as we discussed earlier, higher gut permeability is a bad thing for testosterone because you get system-wide inflammation, things like endotoxin from your gut leaking out into your blood and going and causing inflammation all throughout your body. So you need to get good sleep, 7 to 9 hours a night, same bedtime and wake up time, dark, cool and quiet bedroom, and limiting bright and blue light after sunset. All of these habits will improve microbiome diversity and maximize the amount of testosterone that is released during the night. If you've got sleep apnea or insomnia, that is something you need to get treated as soon as possible because those conditions, apart from just being bad for your health in general, they can lead to low testosterone and altered gut microbiome. You also need to manage stress. Stress disrupts the gut-brain axis, leading to slow digestion, changes in microbial populations, and increased intestinal permeability, all of which are bad for testosterone. Stress can also drive behaviors that harm the gut, like poor diet, alcohol use, and poor sleep. So you need some techniques to manage your stress. Meditation, deep breathing, and yoga all reduce the stress hormone cortisol, and meditation specifically has even been shown to directly promote a healthier gut microbiome. You probably know what genuinely relieves stress for you personally. Maybe it's exercising, or hanging out with your friends, or just like relaxing and watching TV. Try to do some of these relaxing, stress-relieving activities every day. Don't spend the whole day totally stressed out. By calming the systemic stress response, your gut barrier will heal better and inflammation will decrease, allowing normal testosterone production. You also need to be exercising, of course. Exercise is another thing that will help your gut health. Athletes tend to have a higher microbial diversity, which is a good thing, and they also have higher populations of short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria. VO2 max accounts for up to a quarter of the variation in taxonomic richness after allowing for all other factors including diet. Translated into English, that means that increasing your VO2 max by training and getting fitter will substantially increase your gut gut microbiome diversity. And then on the other hand, from all of this, sedentary people have higher levels of endotoxin, which is that inflammatory molecule we discussed earlier that lowers testosterone at every level of the HPG axis. Exercise normalizes bowel movements and walking improves gut motility. I've absolutely noticed this myself. My digestion is always way better if I go for a walk after a meal compared to just sitting there or laying on my couch inside not really moving. So it's pretty clear that consistent, moderate exercise is great for gut health. Not being sedentary and not completely overtraining, doing like 2 or 3 training sessions every day and running yourself into the ground, because overtraining has been shown to increase gut permeability and cortisol, which is not good. You need to avoid toxin exposure as much as possible. Don't smoke. Smoking reduces beneficial microbes and it causes peptic ulcers and it causes leaky gut. Quitting smoking improves your gut microbiome and potentially testosterone. Minimizing exposure to environmental toxins like pesticides, microplastics, BPA, and other endocrine disruptors will benefit the gut bacteria and reduce xenoestrogens or estrogenic activity that competes with androgens. In my microplastics detox guide, I go through over 100 studies detailing the effects that microplastics have on human and animal health, and the gut is one of the worst affected organ systems because this is one of the microplastics' main routes of entry into the body. As you can imagine, a lot of the microplastics in the water you drink and in the food you eat get lodged in your gut lining and cause local inflammation, damaging the gut barrier and leading to then systemic inflammation and all the problems downstream of that. Pretty terrible stuff. So check out that microplastics detox guide if you want to reduce the amount that this is happening to you. But some good basic ideas are to use filtered water, stop eating and drinking out of plastic containers, and eat organic food where possible. Lastly, sunlight and vitamin D. Vitamin D is important for immune regulation in the gut and has been linked to testosterone levels. So you should be getting sunlight exposure on your bare skin, especially on your gut, not just for your gut health and testosterone, just general health. We are designed to get some sunlight exposure every day, not to be indoors, bathed in blue light and not receiving enough of the light signals that we would normally get from being outside. And if you're darker skinned, living in a northern country, you will need to supplement vitamin D because you're not designed to be living in this relatively darker environment, and it means that you won't get the host of other benefits that sunlight provides unless you move somewhere closer to the equator with stronger sunlight. So these lifestyle changes are great because they help address some of the root causes of gut-induced low testosterone. Like if your low testosterone is caused by leaky gut or dysbiosis or systemic inflammation, all of the interventions I've just talked about will help to address that. Now, you probably know I'm more interested in the natural optimization side of things, but I thought I would briefly touch on what medical options are available for this situation. I'm not a doctor, so don't just take my word for these. Always speak to your doctor. The first option is targeted antibiotics. So you can have antibiotics that reduce harmful bacteria in your gut, like rifaximin, which is a non-systemic antibiotic used for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and this can reduce gas-producing bacteria and endotoxin load. And in men with small intestine bacterial overgrowth, some of them see an increase in testosterone after treating their bacterial overgrowth. This is mostly anecdotal data. There's not a lot of studies on this. But antibiotics obviously have to be used very carefully because they can harm the beneficial microbes in your gut as well as the pathogens. Some researchers have even suggested specifically targeting the testosterone degrading bacteria that I discussed way earlier as a treatment for certain metabolic and testosterone related diseases. The next option is a fecal microbiota transplant, which is one that's been getting more attention in recent years, although it sounds absolutely gross. Transplanting a stool from a healthy donor into a patient's gut seems to actually be pretty miraculous for many health conditions. Animal studies have shown that transplanting gut microbes from a high testosterone subject into a low testosterone subject can increase testosterone in the recipients and vice versa. And this is also something that's being considered as a legitimate treatment option for people with testosterone related disorders. There are some medications and supplements that can help to repair the gut lining. So intestinal specific anti-inflammatories like mesalamine or supplements like glutamine and zinc carnosine. These can be helpful in healing leaky gut, improving the gut lining. So by restoring the gut barrier, these could lower systemic inflammation and potentially restore normal testosterone. And lastly, hormone replacement therapy, TRT. Although of course it raises testosterone levels because you're literally injecting testosterone, it does not address the gut. So if the cause of your low testosterone is gut problems, TRT is not going to do anything to solve that. So that is something that still needs to be addressed directly. Even if you have relief from the low testosterone symptoms, that messed up gut is still going to be causing a lot of problems in your body. And in fact, since we know that androgens modulate the gut microbiome, TRT could even have a negative effect on the gut if it's not managed properly. And there is some early human data to suggest that taking exogenous testosterone does affect the microbiota. So there was one study in transgenders taking testosterone, and their glutamate generating pathways in the gut microbiome were increased in abundance because of this exogenous testosterone. So it seems that TRT can affect your gut microbiome. We just don't know yet whether it's in a good or a bad way. There's not enough research on it. So even if you're taking TRT, your gut is not something that can just be ignored. All right, that's all I have on this topic. Let's do a quick summary of the practical tips, because that was a lot of information to take in. Eat whole foods, get fiber in your diet, eat probiotics or fermented foods, avoid excessive sugar or alcohol, sleep well, manage stress, get some exercise, avoid toxins like smoking and microplastics. And it's not really standard yet, but it might be more common in the future for you to get something like a fecal microbiota transplant to treat problems like this. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, you should join my email list, which will be linked in the description. I send several emails a week talking about topics like this. In fact, this video was inspired by an email I did, I think, last week or maybe the week before, and a lot of people were interested in it, so I turned it into a full video. My email list is free. Check it out in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.